In this series of lessons, we'll look at how we learn and why we forget, with a particular focus on lessons for learners. So we'll see how psychology can shed light on best practices when it comes to studying. We'll make an analogy here between the human brain and a computer. Both have two kinds of memory. In a computer, we have the central processing unit, which is crunching data, and then there is a RAM system. The RAM memory is a small capacity memory system, but information can be quickly accessed from that memory system in order that the computer can do computations. But there's also a larger capacity memory system, the hard drive, for example, but getting information from the hard drive is a slower process. So we have a fast, small capacity memory system, and we have a larger, slower memory system. The same will be true of the human brain. Now we can think of the goal of getting an education then is to strongly store information into long-term memory so that it is retrievable when needed. Now notice the word strongly is underlined here because that concept of storing something strongly doesn't seem to apply to computers. Any bit of information that is stored on the hard drive is not stored any stronger or less strong than any other bit. So the computer simply writes data to the hard drive. But in brains, the way the memory system works, some items of information can be weakly stored and some items can be strongly stored. So here we find an important difference between the storage system in a computer and in a brain. So in a brain, we're going to have the RAM system, and that's what some call short-term memory system or the working memory system. What's in your working memory is what you're currently thinking about or perceiving. And so this is a limited capacity memory system. But in addition, we have a long-term memory system, and scientists have discovered the medial temporal lobe and the underlying structure of the hippocampus. These are critical structures in converting short-term memories into long-term memories. But anything that is in your short-term memory or the working memory has the potential to become a long-term memory. So a long-term memory really sort of begins in the working memory system. If we open a book and start reading, we're processing information in our short-term memory system, but it has the potential to be stored into the long-term memory system of the brain. So the working memory system is like the RAM, the long-term memory system is like the hard drive, and as it turns out then, scientists have discovered that there's an interesting transformation that takes place. When we learn something new, the medial temporal lobe structures, the hippocampus included, seems to make a memory trace of that information. But over time, the memory for that study session gets transformed, and scientists call this consolidation. So we'll define system consolidation as the post-encoding reorganization of long-term memory over distributed brain circuits. And the brain circuits involved here include the hippocampus, but then the cerebral cortex, where scientists think the long-term sort of memory system is located. So when we learn something new, the medial temporal lobe and the hippocampus are really important for retrieving that information. But over time, as this process of consolidation happens, then the cortical aspect of the memory becomes more significant for retrieving that information. So we're going to think of long-term memories then as lasting synaptic changes between neurons in the cerebral cortex. And system consolidation then is a dynamic interaction between the hippocampus and cortical memory systems. In a sense, the hippocampus is signaling the cortex to strengthen the memory in the larger long-term memory system. Synaptic changes occur in those brain regions originally activated by the study session. However, cortical synapses require multiple reactivations to make changes that can last a lifetime. So in our picture here, suppose we're reading some text information. The hippocampus is going to make a memory of that information, and we'll need the hippocampus to retrieve that information early on. But over time, this process of consolidation seems to transform the memory, helping to integrate this new memory into the larger long-term memory system in the cerebral cortex. So consolidation, in a sense, is going to strengthen the memory, here indicated by sort of the small text word here becoming larger. So initially the hippocampus is going to be important for retrieving information, and the cortical memory is weak. With consolidation, we strengthen the cortical memory. And it's also important that we realize that this consolidation process can happen repeatedly. Each time the consolidation process happens, we're strengthening the cortical memory trace even more. So that's why multiple reactivations can make very strongly stored memories in our cerebral cortex, the long-term memory system. So consolidation has the effect of strengthening the cortical memory trace so that normal cues are sufficient to retrieve the memory. The new information is integrated into semantic memory. Here we have the icon of our hard drive. So again, the idea is that the working memory system is the short-term memory system, but we want to get that information onto the hard drive, the long-term memory system, and this requires that we consolidate new information. This will strengthen the cortical memory. Now, we're indicating that the memory will be integrated into semantic memory. So what is semantic memory? Semantic memory is our stored knowledge of the world. So all the information we know about the world, basic stuff about the world and ourselves, including just the words in our language. So we can think of education then as integrating new concepts into a web of knowledge, semantic memory. Now, well-educated individuals then, they have stronger links that lead to faster access of information and slower rates of forgetting. So if we look at a brain down here and we think of this web here as existing in the cerebral cortex, and it's a bunch of concepts that are linked together, and this is our semantic memory. So we have information about the world, and we have various concepts that might be linked together. Now, this individual has weak links between the concept of photosynthesis and other relevant concepts. The individual over here has strong links between the relevant concepts. And so the idea is the individual on the right is the better educated individual. Concepts are more strongly linked to other relevant concepts. And what that's going to do is it's going to create faster access to this information. We can retrieve information faster, and we will forget it less quickly. So we'll have slower rates of forgetting. So how is it then that we make strong links in the semantic memory system? Well, here's where we're going to say good study strategies. So the point of this psychology research these days is to help us use the best practices in our study strategies. The best practices are going to be the ones that are going to make strong links in our semantic memory systems. So we want to go from a less educated to a more educated individual. We want a brain that has information that's well integrated and strongly stored.